There is a new Nvidia GPU coming out soon, and this one's going to be the one that most people are going to care about, and it's going to be probably Nvidia's last chance to make it so gamers aren't really mad at them. I'm going to tell you what the GPU is and what it means for the market. Gamers are mad at Nvidia because the prices are way too high. Mostly, nobody's complaining about performance. 4090 is doing great. Even the 4080, if you ignore the price, it's really not a bad GPU at all. It has pretty much everything that you could want. And then, of course, the 4070 Ti is also way too expensive for a 70 class GPU. And you could complain about a couple things. I mean, 12 gigabytes of VRAM is starting to push it a little bit too much for a 4K capable GPU. For 1440p, even though the memory bus is cut down, you should be more than fine, but then you're paying $799 base MSRP for what should be considerably cheaper. And remember to subscribe and smash that like button. They say every time you do, GPUs get about $1 cheaper every 10 years, it seems, instead of going up in price. So the next GPU that Nvidia is going to be releasing, it's going to be the RTX 4070. Now, remember when they announced the 3070? I remember $499, and it beats the $1199 2080 Ti, which was the flagship of the previous generation. That was like, it really hyped it up. People were selling their 2080 Ti's for around $500 because, after all, that's about what it was going to be worth, since the 3070 had basically the same performance. And of course, that never really happened because of the GPU shortage. 2080 Ti's stayed around their original price, and I guess 3070s also most of the time were pretty close to that price as well, often selling for well over $1,000 during 2021. People were happy with Nvidia at that point. $499 for a 3070 was pretty acceptable back a few years ago. Sure, it only had 8 gigabytes of VRAM, but back then you knew that the 3070 was going to be squarely aimed at 1440p or even 1080p gaming, so nobody really bothered with it too much. I mean, even the 3080 had only 10 gigabytes of VRAM, 3080 Ti only 12 gigabytes, so it was acceptable at that point. The prices were still MSRP, at least, fair. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. So now we entered the 4070. This is the GPU that Nvidia probably would have released maybe even before the 4070 Ti. Remember, the 4070 Ti was never supposed to exist yet. That, with Nvidia's original plans, was supposed to be a 4080 12 gigabytes, which of course makes even less sense now when you look back in hindsight, and especially at its $899 price, seems like even a much worse deal. But there we are. $799 is the price of the new 4070 Ti, and I actually wanted to test the 4070 Ti. I didn't buy one. I was curious what you could do to actually put it to its limit, especially with 4K. When would the VRAM start to become a problem? I know games like Hitman 3 or something like that may start to do it. Cyberpunk and a lot of games may stay under 10 gigabytes of VRAM, but let me know down below if you guys would be interested in me getting a 4070 Ti and trying to push it specifically at 4K and see where the limits are of that GPU. Why do I say that? The 4070 Ti, as opposed to that original 3070, is meant to also be a 4K GPU. I mean, 4K is getting much more, readily accessible. It's not like it was before. Yes, Nvidia does target the 4070 Ti mostly at 1440p, and the VRAM limitation could potentially be an issue. But if you're paying $799, that used to be more than like a 1080 Ti. Even the 1080 Ti played 4K fairly decently back in the day. So I'm sure a lot of people will get that 4070 Ti to do 4K. But now that it's out there, the 4070 is going to be one of the most important GPUs that Nvidia launches this generation. First, it's definitely going to be less than the 4070 Ti price, of course, because of the product stack. And then secondly, it's going to be the first, well, like affordable GPU, you can say, for the new generation GPUs. So far, everything is above $799, so that puts it out of reach for many gamers. If the 4070, for example, was the original $499, I think people, you could say, would be very happy with that. We can assume that if the 4070 Ti is performing around the level of like a 3090 Ti, a 4070, a vanilla one, probably would do at least, you would say, a 3080 Ti level type of performance. So should be pretty close. I mean, specs wise, most likely it's going to have that same 12 gigabytes of VRAM. And while that's definitely going to be a 1440p card, the price is really going to dictate if it's popular or not. At the end of the day, with the 4070 Ti, you do get almost 3090 Ti performance for much less power. And if the VRAM isn't a limitation, you're going to get pretty much the same performance. Not to mention one thing that could improve in the future, DLSS 3.0. And I know I bring this up a lot, but the 4070 is where you're really going to start the benefits of that. If you're playing at 1440p and even with ray tracing, you may want to use DLSS on a single player game on something like a 4070, because that's going to help bring you over a certain frames per second goal. And it's going to be a lot more useful there than perhaps sometimes with like a 4080 or 4090, where you may already be hitting 60 frames per second or even close to your monitor's refresh rate, and you may not necessarily need that extra boost. Now, I personally like DLSS 3.0 in certain games. If you do it on like the quality settings, it's hard to tell a difference. You do get some blurring, and I remember yesterday I was playing the Plague Tale Requiem game, and I put it on DLSS 3.0, but the ultra performance, and there you definitely notice a lot of like little graphical, I don't know if you want to call them artifacts or glitches, but for example, it almost looks like when you change your scene and you look at like a barrel on the floor, for example, at first it looks like a bunch of little ants moving, a little bit pixelated, and then it focuses in, with the resolution, and then you see that it's not a bunch of little ants, but it's actually the barrel. You don't really see that if it's on like quality settings on DLSS 3.0, but you definitely see some of those quirky visual, things when you're doing something like ultra performance or something like that. But as a benefit, I mean, at like 4K, I was getting over 200 frames per second with frame generation. And in a one-player game like that, that's like single-player story, you don't need the fastest latency. You can definitely see that there are many benefits. Translate that over to a much more less powerful GPU than like a 4080 or 4090, the 4070, and then it should help you reach nice playable frame rates if you're going to be doing even 4K on something like the 4070. With DLSS 3.0, it could improve in the future. I know a lot of people say, oh, it's fake frames and this and that, but not everybody is playing competitive esports titles where you need the fastest latency. And as long as it's an acceptable range for like a single player game, like if you're playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, for example, and it looks great visually with high frame rates, then it doesn't really matter that much. That's where it may start to really shine in something like a 4070. At the end of the day, you don't have to use DLSS 3.0. You could leave it off and the GPU still has good rasterization. Like the 4070 Ti has rasterization close to a 3090 Ti in many games without any special trickery. It just gives you the option of DLSS, and then you get a significant boost over last generation. I think that may actually start to play a big role in the mid-range GPUs such as the 4070. At $499, I don't think anybody would complain and people would start to like Nvidia again. $599, I'm not too sure. Let's revisit that one. $699, people would be pretty pissed off because that's only $100 less than the 3070 Ti. But looking at Nvidia's previous pricing, they like to price these things within around $100 of each other. Look at the $499 3070. Look at the $599 3070 Ti. Did they just bump everything up about, $200? That's going to be a bit unfortunate. At $699, if the current GPU market continues the way that it is, nobody is going to want to buy the 4070 because it's going to be a much more cut down 4070 Ti. Now, we think that the 4070 Ti, and by we, I mean gamers, should be $699. I mean, $799, it's obviously not selling. $699, I think, is like the breaking point where people would really start to buy it, I feel. And then $599 for a 4070. I mean, it's not ideal, but $499 may be unrealistic to expect Nvidia to go down that low, especially with RTX 3000 inventory still available, even by the time this GPU comes out in the next few months. So I think $599 is a realistic expectation of where people generally would be happy as long as the performance of the 4070 isn't too far off from the 4070 Ti. This is where Nvidia could actually start to garner goodwill back from gamers. If they price it, for example, at $599 and the performance is within a few percentage points of a 4070 Ti, let's say that's basically a way of them to discount a 4070 Ti to something that's going to be more accessible for gamers at $599. I think that would be a very popular GPU and people would be pretty happy. Of course, $499 is not really to be expected. It's a new generation. Nvidia can tout all types of improvements, like it's going to have more VRAM than the 3070 did. It's going to have DLSS 3.0, and after all of the lockdowns and manufacturing issues that we've had the last few years, they're just going to argue that at least a minimum of $100 is fair. I think people would accept that. The reason people don't accept the higher Nvidia prices is when they go way too far. Like a 4080 at $1199 is not reasonable if the 3080 was $699. And likewise, if the 4070 is $699, it's not really reasonable if the original one was $499. $599 is really the limit, I think, for Nvidia to garner goodwill back with gamers. And then, of course, we're going to have the 4060 Ti, which then you can expect maybe to be $499. But if that performance is still really good, but if a performance of a 4060 Ti is still really good, like close to what a 3080 or a little bit above was, I think people may start to accept that as a little bit better. And of course, generally, like the 3060 Ti was still a great GPU. It was a little bit cut down 3070, but it wasn't like a huge difference. Where you start to get to a really big difference was with the 3060. Even though it had 12 gigabytes of VRAM, it was a much slower GPU in general, different tier. And I think maybe the same may be true for something like the 4060. 4060 Ti and 4070 may come pretty close to each other in both release dates, pricing. They're probably going to be like $100 off each other. And then, of course, with performance, I think it should definitely be pretty close, but I think it's likely the 4060 Ti may take over that $499 spot, which, while not terrible, we would like to see that maybe $450. Nvidia could surprise us and maybe make $550 the 4070. Then they really start to talk the gamer value to performance language. It's not that people don't want to buy these GPUs. It's just that the value proposition in such a short period of time went up an amount that's like much less than reasonably expected. I mean, the 4080 is the best example here. Even the 3080 12 gigabyte was $1199 when Nvidia tried to up that price. There's no way you're going to justify that $500 increase while the GPU still remained that same 80 class, that same tier. It's not like it transformed into a 3090 or a 4090 class GPU. So it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on the 4070 and 4060 Ti, not only for performance, but I think the price is going to be very, very important. People are not happy right now. GPUs are abundantly available, especially the 4070 Ti, which is not selling. So I think for Nvidia's sake and for gamers, we really hope to see these GPUs not only perform well, but come in at a price that everybody can agree is at least fair. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.